The White House and the Senate have agreed to a roughly $2 trillion rescue package, the largest in American history. The plan would mean direct cash payments of $1,200 for many individuals and $3,000 for most families. A vote in the Senate is expected today, and as Nancy Cordes explains, it's expected to pass with overwhelming support.
The Senate has reached a bipartisan agreement on a historic relief package for this pandemic.
It was the early morning announcement the entire economy had been waiting for.
To all Americans, I say, help is on the way, big help and quick help.
The massive bill is designed to bring relief to workers and businesses, hospitals and state governments, and those who have already lost their jobs, boosting unemployment insurance by $600 a week through July.
It's crazy, but we'll be fine. Yeah.
That money will help the 40 restaurant workers that Lisa Spooner and Kevin Clark, restaurateurs in Atlanta, were forced to lay off last week.
We're in a great country. There's money. We'll just go further in debt. I mean, people need help, and money is the answer.
To help other small businesses keep their workers on, the bill contains nearly $400 billion in grants, plus another $500 billion in loans for major industries like the airlines. There's also more than $130 billion for the nation's healthcare providers.
There is much more money for our hospitals, for our nurses and physicians, for our nursing homes, for our community health centers, to do the job they need to do.
And $1,200 for most individuals.
We're going to pass this legislation later today.
CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes joins us now from Capitol Hill. And Nancy, Democratic senators blocked the bill crafted by Republicans twice earlier this week. So what do we know about the changes that were agreed on in the final negotiations between the two parties?
Well, there were lots of agreements, large and small, that ended up leading to this breakthrough in the middle of the night. The biggest agreement has to do with that $500 billion pot of money that will be used to make loans to big industries that have been affected by this crisis. We're talking about the airlines, the hotel industry. When they get those loans, the Treasury Department will now have to disclose who's getting the money and how they are using it within a set period of time. That is a big change. Democrats wanted more transparency about how this money was being used and who it was being used by. A lot of them, frankly, still have PTSD from 10 years ago when they passed a similar piece of legislation called TARP during the recession. There were not that many strings attached for these big businesses, and many Democrats felt that it led to a lot of waste, excess, and poor behavior by these companies. They want to prevent that from happening again. So that is an agreement that was hammered out by the Treasury Secretary and Democrats. But these last-minute talks also boosted the amount of money for hospitals, which, as we know, so badly needed right now, and for state and local governments. You know, I don't think people have really realized this, that it's state and local governments that run so much of the operations that are in such high demand right now. In many cases, they oversee the hospitals, they obviously oversee the schools, and they've been so hard hit because they rely on sales taxes for revenue. And if people aren't shopping at local businesses, well, guess what? They're not paying that much in sales tax. So there's now a huge pot of money for state and local governments in this bill as well.
And Nancy, I think everyone's wondering what happens next after this, and then when will the financial help actually reach Americans?
Well, I just spoke to Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. He got just a couple of hours of sleep last night after finishing up those negotiations with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, and I asked him when the final Senate vote is going to take place. It hasn't been scheduled yet, and he said the delay is that staffers are still writing up some of these last-minute agreements into legislative text, so you've got the entire bill written before you vote on it. That is a prerequisite, and until they they know exactly how long it's going to take them, they can't schedule the vote. So he anticipates it will happen sometime today. Leader McConnell, the Republican leader of the Senate, said the same thing, but we don't have an exact time. We do expect that it will pass overwhelmingly, so that's not really in doubt. But what is in doubt is how this is going to be handled by the House. We know that leaders would very much like to pass this bill there by something known as UC, and that's where all the House members essentially give their consent to just let this thing pass without an actual in-person vote. That would prevent more than 400 House members from having to get on planes and come back here to Washington, D.C., which would involve some risk for everyone involved. The hitch is that only one lawmaker in the House can prevent that, can object to this passing by UC, and then you'd have to bring everyone back or figure out some other workaround. And so that is a big question mark at this point. What senators are hoping is that it will pass so overwhelmingly on this side of the Capitol that it will prompt anyone on the other side who was thinking of standing in the way to step aside.
Okay, Nancy, we will be watching for that vote later today. Thank you.